Those of you who think this is a partisan issue, guess again, because we have this article from the New York Times on January 15th. Paulson Friedman called to testify about AIG. The list of those called to testify for a House inquiry into the American International Group and its payouts to its counterparties just gained a few more high-wattage witnesses. Henry M. Paulson, Jr., the former Treasury Secretary, and Stephen Friedman, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, have been asked to speak before the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, the committee said Friday. The committee, led by Representative Towns, a Democrat from New York, has already called Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner to testify at the hearing, which is now scheduled for January 27th. Among the key players in crafting the bailout were Mr. Paulson and Mr. Friedman, both former Goldman chief executives, and Mr. Geithner, who at the time was president of the New York Fed. Mr. Geithner has said that there was no question at the time about paying out AIG's counterparties in full. Republicans have also sought more information from Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, who also played an integral role in the AIG plan. Now we have an article from the Business Insider written by Dylan Radigan on January 12th, The Case Against Tim Geithner. As we sit here today, Wall Street continues to exploit a policy of government-sponsored giveaways and secrecy to pay themselves billions. Record-setting bonuses due to banks like Goldman Sachs as early as next week. Yet instead of acting as our cop, Secretary Tim Geithner has become central to what may be a cover-up of the greatest theft in U.S. history. Here is the evidence. Count 1, the AIG emails. Recently released emails show Geithner's New York Federal Reserve Bank directing AIG to keep details of the 100 cents on the dollar bailout secret in 2008. A reversal of the traditional role of government, which is to force companies to become more transparent, not less. A Treasury spokeswoman says Secretary Geithner played no role in these decisions, and indeed by November 24th he was rescued from working on issues involving specific companies, including AIG. Friday, the White House also defended the Treasury Secretary. Press Secretary Gibbs said, these decisions did not rise to his level at the Fed. And then CNN's Ed Henry said, how do you know that he wasn't involved? He was the leader of the New York Fed. And then Gibbs said back, right, but he wasn't on the emails that have been talked about and wasn't party to the decision that was being made. He wasn't party to the decision to hide $62 billion payouts to firms that became insolvent during his 5-year watch at the New York Fed. Congressman Darrell Issa speculates that maybe Geithner wasn't on the emails in question because his people felt so strongly they already knew their boss's intentions, they didn't feel the need to bother him with the details. Count 2. He wasn't even a regulator. In Geithner's own words during the confirmation hearings in March, first of all, I was never a regulator. I'm not a regulator. According to the New York Fed Bank's website, that was your job. And I quote from the Fed's website, as part of our core mission, we supervise and regulate financial institutions in the 2nd District. That district, of course, is the epicenter for bailed-out banks and billion-dollar bonuses. Count 3, the Christmas Eve taxpayer massacre. As you were wrapping those last presents, Geithner's Treasury Department lifted the $400 billion cap on taxpayer responsibility for potential losses for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The new cap? Unlimited taxpayer funds. Interesting timing. Christmas Eve. Tim? Still, no word on recovering the hundreds of millions paid to CEOs who created this mess. Count 4. He's too cozy with certain banks. Remember those call logs when he first started? 80 contacts with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Citigroup CEOs in just 7 months. But Bank of America CEO only got 3 calls. Apparently Bank of America is not one of Geithner's favorites, especially when you consider that there are still many unanswered questions about Tim Geithner's role in threatening to fire Bank of America management if they didn't go through with the deal to buy Merrill Lynch. Count 5. TARP. Special investigator Neil Borofsky's report says Geithner's New York Fed overpaid the big banks through AIG by billions of dollars. Geithner says it had to be done. Maybe so, maybe not, but this takes us to our final point. Since then, the Treasury Secretary has yet to really prove whose side he's on, the Wall Street bigwigs or the American taxpayer. Here's the litmus test. Mr. Geithner shows us the past 10 years of AIG emails or step down so that we can get somebody who will. A crime has been committed against the American taxpayer, and right now you are standing at the door of the crime scene refusing to let anyone in. Show us you're not involved, Mr. Geithner. Prove the White House correct in defending you. All we are asking for is the transparency promised by the president you serve. In climate science news, we have this article from the Times Online on January 17th, World Misled Over Himalayan Glacier Meltdown. A warning that climate change will melt most of the Himalayan glaciers by 2035 is likely to be retracted after a series of scientific blunders by the United Nations body that issued it. 2 years ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a benchmark report that was claimed to incorporate the latest and most detailed research into the impact of global warming. A central claim was that the world's glaciers were melting so fast that those in the Himalayas could vanish by 2035. In the past few days, the scientists behind the warning have admitted that it was based on a news story in the New Scientist, a popular science journal published 8 years before the IPCC's 2007 report. It has also emerged that the New Scientist report was itself based on a short telephone interview with Syed Hasnain, a little-known Indian scientist then based at a university in Delhi. Hasnain has since admitted that the claim was speculation and was not supported by any formal research. If confirmed, it would be one of the most serious failures yet seen in climate research. The IPCC was set up precisely to ensure that world leaders had the best possible scientific advice on climate change. Professor Murari Lal, who oversaw the chapter on glaciers in the IPCC report, said he would recommend that the claim about glaciers be dropped. We have an article from the World Socialist website on January the 12th by Hiram Lee. White House seeks to block new environmental regulations on coal ash. The Obama administration is attempting to block new regulations proposed by the Environmental Protection Agency that would designate coal ash as a toxic waste. Up to 130 million tons of coal ash, the waste product created during coal combustion, are produced each year in the U.S., with approximately 40% of it going for use in other products such as asphalt or concrete. 60% of the ash is stored in landfills or ash ponds throughout the country. Exposure to coal ash through contaminated water supplies presents significant health risks. The waste product contains toxic contaminants such as arsenic, mercury, lead, and barium, which can lead to cancer, birth defects, or disorders of the nervous system. There are currently no uniform federal standards in place governing the building or maintenance of coal ash containment facilities. The role of the Obama administration has been to prevent the EPA proposal from moving forward, acting on behalf of the coal and energy companies. Should the proposal be allowed to go through, it will only be after the administration has worked with the energy conglomerates to revise it in such a way as to arrange the most favorable financial conditions possible for the companies. A number of commentators have pointed to the unusual and suspicious nature of the OMB's aggressive involvement, particularly at this early stage of the EPA's push for new regulations. Cass Sunstein, administrator of the White House Offices of Information and Regulatory Affairs, located within the OMB, has held some 20 meetings since October 2009 with coal industry representatives to discuss their concerns. The negligence of these companies in the management of their toxic waste has produced significant consequences for the environment and the U.S. population. Among the more publicized disasters involving coal ash pollution was a major containment failure that occurred in Kingston, Tennessee in December of 2008. 1 billion gallons of wet coal ash were released into the environment when the wall of a containment pond owned by Kingston Fossil Plant was breached. Some 5.4 million cubic yards of land were covered in the toxic sludge and dozens of homes were damaged. The nearby Emery River was contaminated. Tests of the river subsequently showed an elevated presence of lead and thallium. Cleanup of the disaster is expected to last through 2013. And then the article ends, the Obama administration's efforts to block the new EPA regulations are in line with its general economic policies. No measures can be put in place that would in any way diminish corporate profits. Well, duh.